Hi, it's Alejandro for the Brewers. And this is a very special video because not only are we going to walk you through our newest release, AB Doverb, but today is the second anniversary of Audio Brewers. You know, I started this company a couple of years ago when I was just frustrated with the whole philosophy of sampling, where you just point a couple of microphones to an instrument from different positions and just deliver baked stereo mixes to, the composers. I knew that music goes way beyond these left and right baked channels, and I always wanted to approach it from an immersive way where it is you, the composer or the producer, who chooses where music or sound is coming from. So, we started this company with sample libraries, immersive sample libraries, and then we started creating plugins, and now we are trying to offer a big gamma to anybody who is involved in creating music, from composers and musicians to sound engineers or producers. So thank you so much for being there with us, for enjoying our products. And, if you have any comments, just please write them below. And well, without further ado, let's start by talking about reverbs in general and the differences between AB reverb and AB Doverb. So generally speaking, digital reverbs use an algorithm to create reflections in each of the channels. So when you have a stereo reverb, you have like a left channel doing its own reflections and a right channel doing its own reflections. And these reflections, sometimes they could bleed to the other channel so that you create this stereophony. But generally speaking, these reflections are just localized in each of the channels that are baked. So the difference between these reverbs and Audio Brewers reverbs is that we are creating reverbs trying to ignore the fact that, there have to be 2 channels or 5 channels or 16 channels. It doesn't matter how many channels there are. We are creating these reflections in a sonic field that is 3-dimensional. And these reflections are then translated to, stereo or 5.1 or an Atmos setup. So the whole digital reflection field is not a left or right or, surround left, surround channel localized, algorithm happening per channel, but instead you have like a 3-dimensional sphere where all the reflections are happening. And then it is at the decoding stage where the user is selecting, where exactly the reflections are being picked from. And this is the difference between traditional reverbs and our reverbs. We're trying to create these reverbs in a 3-dimensional space as opposed to just in a right and in a left channel. Now, the difference between AB reverb, which is our previous reverb, and AB Doverb, which is this reverb, is that when I was creating AB reverb, I was way too married with the idea that this reverb has to sound real. So I was way too focused on trying to create these reverberations as real as possible and as spatially aware as possible, so that you could have like location properties of the sound, as real as possible. With AB Doverb, I just abandoned this idea a little bit, more, and I try to create a reverb that just sounds good, so could be less real, but it sounds more harmonic, more aesthetic if you are working like with music or with abstract concepts, So while AB reverb is going to fit very nice in your sound design if you're creating sound that, maybe goes tied to an image, or maybe you want to just keep the realism, AB Doverb works great when you just want to fill your space with an aesthetic reverb that is just going to fill your mono or your stereo sound in a beautiful way. So this is the difference between AB Doverb and AB reverb. They just complement each other. They are not, they don't intend to compete against each other. They're just different. Like AB reverb, it goes for realism, and AB Doverb goes for, aesthetically pleasant reverberations. That's it. So now let's just go and explore AB Doverb in the DAW and see how it works. So for starters, I have created here a project with different sound examples where we're just going to apply our AB Doverb plugin. We have a guitar strumming a rhythm, we have some drums playing something, we have a voice singing, we have a voice speaking, we have a piano, and then we have a third order ambisonic file, just so that you can see how this reverb adapts to stereo. So let's just start from the very beginning. As you can see, my project is completely empty. There's nothing inserted. Everything is going to my stereo output. And each track is just a stereo track, except the third order Ambisonics one, which is a third order Ambisonics track, but it's going to stereo. Even my voice tracks are in stereo, even though the source file is in mono. That is because AB Doverb works in stereo minimum. So if you are inserting a mono file, you should be inserting it in a stereo channel, because the output is going to be a stereophonic reverb, or an Ambisonics if you're working in Ambisonics. So let's start exploring AB Doverb. We have our guitar track, which sounds like this. So it's just a very simple strum. I'm just going to insert AB Doverb as an insert in this track. So as soon as you open AB Doverb, we can see that there is our preset system where you can load a preset, you can save a new preset, or you can delete a preset. And then we have our input and our output. Generally, this happens automatically depending on the DAW, but some DAWs require your manual interaction. So you just have to make sure as soon as you insert AB Doverb that the input and the outputs are set correctly. So in this case, because our source file is in stereo, our input is in stereo, and because our track and our output is in stereo, our output is going to be in stereo. Then we have our presence control, which sets the directionality of the sound. So generally, we want to have this as discrete. The further we move it to omnipresent, we're just going to lose stereophony, and everything is just going to sound like a mono file. Then we have our width, which controls how wide the stereophony of the stereo file is going to be. Finally, we have our dry signal, which you can lower, you can raise the volume, or you can just double click just to set in 0. So AB Doverb was created with quick results in mind. So we try to add a few controls so that you could have just like immediate results. So we have the typical reverb size. Then we have our buoyance control, which is something that we created for our AB stutter, which means that for mono and stereo signals, the signal before it is processed is going to be expanded to neighboring dimensional planes, just expanding it a little bit. So the more buoyance you give, you're going to have a more expand signal in your spatial field, and it's going to be less directional. So depending on how you want to process your sound, you just control this here. Then you have your pre-delay, which can go from 0 milliseconds all the way to 300. Then you have your damp control and your expand, which expand is a little bit like the width control you will have in a stereo reverb. But because this is not a stereophonic reverb, there is no width here. There is more than width. There is width, there is height, and there is depth. So expand increases the reverb size all around the spatial field. Finally, you have your volume for your reflections, which can go from -48 all the way to +24 decibel. And then you have a one-band equalizer where you can shape the color of your reverb. So you can increase or decrease the gain of a specific frequency. And then you have a Q that helps you set the curve of your EQ. Finally, you have your spatial control where you can rotate the reverberations horizontally or vertically. And you can mute the mid channel or the sides, which is like the width dimensional plane, or the front back, which is the depth dimensional plane, or the top bottom, which is the height dimensional plane. So these 4 controls are a bit experimental so that you can just create like unique colors with your reverb. So let's start with our guitar track. I'm just going to be playing with the reverb, just trying to find a nice color that could fit this guitar and then blend it with the dry signal. So I'm just going to narrow it down to my sound and I'm gonna loop it. And let's go. So, you know, this is just a quick result, and it's something that I believe works nice. Let's just compare to how it sounds with and without reverb. So there you have a nice reverb that could work on your guitar track. Now let's move on to our drums track. So I'm just going to remove my reverb from here, and I'm just going to add it on my drums track. So first, let me just bypass this and see what we have here. Okay, so we have this rhythm playing, and now I'm just going to do the same. Let's just find a reverb that could work nicely here. I'm just going to create something a little bit experimental. I'm just going to do a reverb with a lot of pre-delay so that we can hear as if these drums were in a very, very big place. Let's just see what we can do here. And again, because my input sound is in stereo and my output is in stereo, I'm just going to leave the input and the output in stereo. So let's just experiment a bit. This button, I don't really know how to name it, but I can describe it for you. So it uses an alternative way of approaching the late reflections of the reverb so that they become deeper. Kind of imagine if your reverb was like a very deep, so deep that the late reflections have more weight than the early reflections. I don't know, it's something that you have to be trying yourself so that you can hear the difference. So let me just try and show you the difference of this button. So yeah, it's like if the opposite side of the sound contains more energy than the side where the sound is coming from. So yeah, it's more or less like that. So let's move on to our voice singing. So I'm just going to remove a Doverb from here, and I'm just going to add it here. And here our input is in stereo and our output is in stereo because our channel is stereo, but our source file is mono. So I'm just going to move to mono. That way I am sure that the reverb is going to be processed correctly. So my source sound is mono, but my output is to my stereo track. So I'm just leaving the output in stereo. So let's see what we have here first without any plugins. Okay, so obviously what we're going to do here is a very big reverb. You know, we want this voice to just embrace us, the listeners. So let's just go for it. Okay, this sounds nice. One thing that I will do is, just because this recording originally contains a lot of noise, I will use an expander just to clean a little bit what comes to the reverb, but I'm going to try and avoid third-party plugins, and I'm just going to try and fix it here, just cutting the end and fading it out. Okay. And now, since my reverb is very long, this ending is going to be much more subtle. And you can even freeze this last note so that you just can keep the pad running for as long as you want. This freeze button is very useful if you want to create like eternal paths, you know, using source material that you have. It's great for sound design. Now let's move to our voice pitch. Let me just remove AB Doverb from here. And let's add it here. Okay, so for our voice on speech, originally it sounds like this.
Endless cycles with no change eventually end without warning.
Okay, so for this pitch, I'm just going to add a little bit of reverb so that the voice doesn't sound so isolated. Like, it sounds a little bit like as if it was in a recording booth, and I just want to avoid that. So again, I'm just going to set my input to mono because my original file is in mono.
Endless cycles with no change eventually end without warning. Endless cycles with no change eventually end without warning. Endless cycles with no change eventually end without warning. Endless cycles with no change eventually end without warning. Endless cycles with no change eventually end without warning.
Okay, so what I did here is just create a very, very discrete reverb so that it's not that invasive, but now the voice doesn't sound so isolated. So if we compare the sound with and without reverb,
Endless cycles with no change eventually end without warning. Endless cycles with no change eventually end without warning. Endless cycles with no change eventually end without warning. Endless.
okay, I think it works pretty nice. What if we used a preset here? For example, this.
Endless cycles with no change eventually end without warning. Endless cycles with no change eventually end without warning. Endless cycles with no change eventually end without warning.
Yeah, you can even use the presets if you just want to, you know, get instant results. Let's go to the piano. So for the piano, we have this. Okay, so this piano already contains a little bit of natural reverb, but we're just going to add more reverb so that we just make it a bit, a bit more aesthetic. Let's see what we can do here. Okay, this could be something that we could do if you wanted a bright reverb. And what about if I wanted a darker reverb? Let's see what we can do here. And finally, let's just try Doverb here with our third order ambisonics test. So this is just a voice going all around the clock in an ambisonics environment. So it theoretically should go around you horizontally, but because we are converting it to stereo, you're just going to listen to it going to the right and then to the left.
0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 o'clock.
So if I add my Doverb here, and we remove the reverberations.
0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
You can see that it goes all around your head. So now let's apply Doverb to this. Our input is in Ambisonics because our file is in Ambisonics, and our output is in Ambisonics because even though our track is going through a stereo file, I don't want this Ambisonics output to be converted by the plugin because Nuendo is already converting it to stereo. So let's see how it sounds without just moving anything at all.
0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 o'clock.
Okay, and Again, you can play with it as you want. So for example, if I remove all the expand and the buoyance, it's just going to be more directional, but again, it's going to retain some reverberation all around me. So it will sound like this.
0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, unplug.
And if I expand it all the way, it sounds like this.
0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, unplug.
So as you can hear, when it is expanded, you already cannot differentiate where the voice is coming from. And when it is not expanded, you can hear where the voice is coming from in your spatial field. And this is how AB Doverb works in stereo. Now let's move to the world of Dolby Atmos. I'm just going to convert this project to a Dolby Atmos project. I'm going to make each of these tracks an object, and then I'm going to use AB Doverb to just expand each of these objects. So the first thing I'm going to do is convert this to a Dolby Atmos project. Okay, and now let's just organize this a little bit. And everything is going to my standard bed, so if I press play. Okay, I'm not listening to anything yet because I haven't routed. And finally, let's just get rid of these two buses. Okay, so now I have my standard bed here, I have my renderer here, and all my tracks are going to my standard bed. The third order Ambisonics one is being converted to 712 because the standard bed in Dolby Atmos is a 712 track. And so if I just press the guitar solo, for example, okay, you can hear that it's sounding on the left and on the right. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is convert all these tracks to objects. So first, I'm going to grab whatever is stereo and quickly convert it to object. You can see here that now all these tracks are objects. Finally, my third order Ambisonics track cannot be directly converted to an object because before it's being converted to an object, it has to be converted to something, because while it is Ambisonics, there are no speakers, it is just the three-dimensional field. So I'm just going to create a track, a group track, which is going to be 714. And I'm going to call it Decoded Ambisonics. I'm going to send my Ambisonics track there. And this is what I'm going to convert to an object. So if I go to my ADM and I convert it to an object, you can see that it has been converted to an object. Now, this object is what I like calling a three-dimensional object because it's not only the mono or the stereo speakers in, my three-dimensional field, but it is a completely 7.0.4. So it contains height information, it contains surround information, front information, and this is something that Nuendo and Cubase Pro can handle pretty cool. It'll grab more objects in my project, but depending on the sound, if it is a three-dimensional sound and I want to keep the three-dimensional capabilities of it, I don't want to convert it to stereo so that I convert it back to Atmos. So I will just keep it three-dimensional. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new group track, which is going to contain AB Doverb. I'm just going to use AB Doverb as an independent group track because the reverb is going to go to my bed while my objects are going to go directly to the decoder. My objects are going to be kept independent, whereas my reverb is going to be fused with whatever is happening in my bed. So now I'm going to create one track for my AB Doverb. Now, this is very important because I want my reverb to be three-dimensional. I'm going to create a third order Ambisonics group track, and then I'm going to send that to my bed, meaning that it's going to be Nuendo, the one who is going to be in charge of decoding these three-dimensional reflections to whatever is happening. So I'm just going to create a new group track. It's going to have a third order Ambisonics configuration. I'm just going to call it AB Doverb. And I'm going to insert AB Doverb in this track. So if I go to the inserts, and you can see that the input is Ambisonics because whatever comes here, Nuendo already has converted it to Ambisonics. And the output is Ambisonics because whatever leaves from here is going to be converted by Nuendo from Ambisonics to whatever. In this case, it's going to go to 712, which is the configuration of Dolby Atmos bed. So basically, when you are sending a sound from a track, whether it's an object track or a normal track, to an Ambisonics track, Nuendo is already doing the encoding. So the input of the plugin is already in Ambisonics because if you're sending a mono track, it is not receiving a mono sound. It is receiving a third order Ambisonic sound because before it reaches the inserts, Nuendo has already encoded it. And then when it goes to the output, again, it is going to be Nuendo the one who converts this track back to whatever speaker setup you're using. So you're leaving the input in Ambisonics and the output in Ambisonics. And now I'm just going to lower the dry volume because each object is its own dry sound. So I'm just interested in the wet volume for this Ambisonics reverb. So now if I just mute my guitar and if I play it, I can hear that the sound is coming out from the left and from the right channel. So just like a normal object, you can use your panner to just place the guitar wherever you want. But before doing that, I'm just going to send it to my reverb channel. So I'm going to add a send. It's going to go to the Doverb group. And I'm just going to leave it pre-fader. So if I solo them and I press play, you can see that there is already sound coming from the 7.1.2 system, even though the guitar only exists on the front left and front right. So this is the cool thing of 8-bit Doverb, that even though my track is stereo and sound is just coming from there in front, I can hear a reverberation coming all around me and above me and everything. So if I go to my reverb and I find a sound configuration for it, now the thing here is that I'm not down mixing this to stereo, so you are only hearing the front left and the front right channels because I want to leave the signal 714 so that I can hear and I can describe what is going on for you. I'm going to down mix this to stereo later so that you can hear what I did, but right now I can tell you that if I press play, I can hear that the reverb is completely, embracing me, like the guitar, I can feel that the guitar is just completely filling the room. And the cool thing about this is that even if I open my three-dimensional panel and I start moving the guitar all around, the reverb is spatially aware of these changes. So it's going to, it's going to behave depending on where the guitar exists. So if I just press play, it's very cool because I can hear the dry signal moving around me and the reverb, it's somehow directional and it fills the room depending on where my dry signal is coming from. Now, let me just go back to the beginning and I'm just going to downmix this to stereo so that you can hear it. So now in stereo, if I press play, you can hear the difference between the guitar without reverb and the guitar with reverb. And now if I start moving the dry signal, you will see that the reverb is aware on where the space of, this processing is happening. So if I press play, is what makes everything so unique. Like, this is not one speaker just processing reflections, another speaker processing reflections. No, this is like a whole spheric field of sonic information that is just being decoded to your speakers depending on where the source is coming from. So let's just move to my next track. Let me just lower the volume here, and I'm just going to send this to Doverb as well. And if I press play, let me just move it back to 714. Okay, so you can hear that the drums are these two objects, and this is my bed, and the bed is reacting to the two objects. Okay, so here, if I open Doverb again, so right now I was just keeping whatever was from the previous track. Let's do something different. For example, let's do something directional. Let's remove the expansion and everything. So if I press play, again, you have the drums right in front of you, and then you have like a very seldom like taste of reverberation happening around you. So if I open my panner and I start moving the drums around me, let me just mute the dry, and let's just listen to only the reverb. I mean, this just works. It's nice because, I cannot hear the dry signal, but I definitely can hear that something is moving because the reverb color is changing depending on where I'm putting my drums. Let me just make it stereo so that you can hear the differences. So now here is with my dry signal happening. And now let's just mute the dry signal and see how it moves. So you can hear that whenever I move my drums to the left or to the right, the whole reverb, just moves towards there because the reflections are happening more there than here. That's because I didn't use the expand, So if I increase the expand, there's going to be more reflections happening in the opposite side. And if I press on my button that just alternate the light reflections, the difference is going to be bigger. Check it out. And this is exactly how this works. Let's just move to the next track, which will be our voice singing. Let me just remove the reverb from here and send my voice to my Doverb track. Let's see. Let me just send it back to 714 so that I can hear the difference. And so, yeah, for this voice singing, I had done something like huge so that it feels everything, so that it sounds like, immersive and everything. So I'm just going to do something like that again. This is quite unique because right now I have removed my dry signal completely and I'm just working with my wet reflections. So now I can hear that the voice is coming from everywhere, behind me, above me, in front of me, on my sides and everything. And it's just like completely embracing me, acoustically speaking. So that's very cool because I have used the expand all the way and the boy, like, I don't know, like 60% or something. I cannot really hear where, the sound is coming from exactly, but it is just coming from everywhere evenly. So I guess that if I move my panner, there's not gonna be much difference, but let's just try it. Yeah, there is not much difference because there is so much expansion and buoyance going on that it's just like everywhere, I can hear it everywhere. So it's not directional at all. It's quite special. Okay, let's move to the next track. So the next track is the voice speech, which, I don't know, you could imagine that is something happening in the intro of a movie or something like that. So we want a very, very soft reverberation so that it just doesn't feel that isolated. So when I press play, endless. Let me just send it back to its original settings.
Endless cycles with no change eventually end without warning.
Okay, so this is pretty nice because you have the dialogue happening right in front in the center where dialogue is supposed to happen, but then you have a soft reverberation going all around you, so you just feel more immersed. And this is just with the, default settings.
Endless cycles with no change. Endless cycles with no change.
Let me just go to stereo so that you can hear it.
Endless cycles with no change eventually end without warning. Endless cycles with no change eventually end without warning.
So now if we go to our piano, let's send it to Doverb and see what happens right out of the box. Okay, so this one is very nice because you have a piano that is just like, thin. It's a bit thin, this piano. It could have more space, and AB Doverb is helping it grab this space. So if you wanted to position this piano somewhere, say that you were doing some music, let's see what we can do. Okay, so as an object, I just put the piano over there, but without reverb, it just sounds there, and that's like completely isolated. Like you wouldn't be able to glue a piano like that in a mix. But if you use a reverb, you can hear that it just feels completely in your mix. And if I pass it to 714, I mean, I can hear the piano over there, but I can just hear the reflections all around me. It's pretty cool. And finally, let's just go to my decoded Ambisonics object. So if I listen to it with nothing.
0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
So now I could hear the voice going clockwise, going like 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. So if you send that to Doverb,
Zero, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
I mean, it's amazing because you can hear that the voice, while it moves, like the reflections change completely on the opposite side and around it and everything. So if I mute the dry,
0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
it's just so pleasant. Let me just down mix it to stereo so that you can hear the difference.
0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, o'clock.
So that is super cool, but you know what's cooler? That Nuendo has these three-dimensional objects. So if I go to my object, I can control how big it is. And depending on how big, small, or how it rotated it is and everything, the reflections of AB Doverb are just going to act accordingly. Let's just add a little bit of dry.
0.
Okay, and I'm just going to move this thing around, you know, just make it smaller, bigger and stuff so that we can hear how it changes. Let me just change the expansion to be less expanded and more directional.
0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And of course, let me just upmix it to 714.
0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 0, 1, 2.
Okay, so like this, I have no idea where the north is in this object because I have just, you know, tilted it and rotated it differently. But I can tell you that even though the voice is moving somehow, I don't really understand how, the reverberations are happening again accordingly to whatever my object I don't know, shape is, you know? So that's pretty cool because you can change the rotation of a three-dimensional object and AB Doverb is just gonna change exactly the way you have manipulated your dry object. So yeah, this is what AB Doverb is all about. A reverb that has been designed for quick results where you don't have to spend much time in it. You're just gonna have something aesthetic, ready to go, and it's gonna help you in your workflow so that you don't have to spend much time configuring how your reverb is gonna sound. It's always gonna give you something quite beautiful. And if you have like mono or stereo source material, it's just going to fill your sonic space with, you know, reflections that are very, very pleasant. We hope you enjoyed this video and thank you so much for these 2 years of joy. And well, we'll see you in the next one, which is completely crazy. Stay tuned. Thank you for watching.